I'm Anne-Marie from brambleberry.com. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be showing you how to make this amazing succulent melt and pour soap. Now, it's not a beginner recipe, but boy, the final product is fantastic. If you are a beginner at melt and pour soap, stop, scroll down, watch the first 4 or 5 in our melt and pour series to learn kind of the basics of melt and pour before tackling this one. This project builds on the huge popularity of the Brambleberry succulent mold. So we designed this mold at Brambleberry for our botanical gardens release and launch. And boy, you guys loved it. It's made out of silicone, so it's really easy to release. And what we've done with this is we went ahead and made these cute little guys, but then upping the ante, pop them into another bar of soap to have a really cool embed. And of course, we had to scent this with the Lush Succulent Fragrance, which is very green, herbaceous, lots of cucumber notes, but so it doesn't fall flat. It's got some vetiver and sandalwood right in the bottom. You won't be able to smell it, but what it means is that it really comes through beautifully in the bar of soap. The first step for this 2-part process is to make our succulents. And you can see there are so many different options. You can really go pretty simple with just a 1-color succulent, or you can make the tips sort of a different color. Lots of different options. The one key though is we want to pour these very thin because we need it for it to kind of be able to sit and get embedded into this mold. And so you want to really pour thin. So be thinking about that when you're planning how much soap to melt. So this is with the Brambleberry melt and pour base, and when you do melt and pour, of course, you want in tiny chunks. So these are, about 1 inch and, well, 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Melt it in the microwave on 30-second bursts. I'll be right back. Clear melt and pour, totally melted. Got the Brambleberry color block. This is the Kelly green. And the thing I like about using the color blocks is that they're, well, pre-mixed in melt and pour soap already. And so they're perfect for easy kind of just toss in and get the color you want. And here, I'm just gonna start with a little bit, and then I can always add more. You can't ever take it away though, so keep that in mind. Such a pretty color. I love those sparkles. So I'm gonna do one, and then I'm gonna add some more, and I'm gonna do some kind of different colors. And remember, we're pouring these really short, so just enough until you get all the kind of leaves filled in. I'm gonna take my rubbing alcohol and spritz with rubbing alcohol so the backs are perfectly flat with no air bubbles. And then I think I might take my chrome green and get a little bit darker, a little bit more nuanced of a color, and see where that gets me. And when you're using the color blocks, you start kind of with smaller chunks because that way it's easier for the soap to get melted. Keeping in mind though, if it ever doesn't melt, you can always toss this back into the microwave for like 15 seconds just to get all those color blocks melted. I like how that's turning out. Notice I went from lightest to darkest. Kelly green, as you can see, is significantly lighter than this green chrome. Okay, let's see if we can get a slightly different shade. I'm gonna take the hydrated chrome green oxide, which is a really nice, gorgeous, non-bleeding colorant. Is oxide base, which means it's considered an all-natural colorant. And just mix that in. And I can see that this is cooling down because my color blocks are still kind of in chunks. So I'm gonna go ahead and just pop this back in the microwave, probably just for like 5 seconds, maybe 10. This small of an amount of soap will tend to boil really quickly. So now that that's fully melted, my hydrated chrome green is all the way in. I'm just pouring really slowly and evenly. Remember, we want to pour these thinly. So now that all the leaves are colored, all done. So for this one, I'm gonna show you how to make this really cool look. And what I notice is you get the most kind of differentiation and the most kind of contrast when you're doing a white and a clear melt and pour soap. So for the tips, I'm doing a white melt and pour soap. I'm gonna use the Brambleberry Goat's Milk melt and pour, but you can use just regular white melt and pour soap. I'm gonna melt this in the microwave. Honestly, this will probably be like a 30-second melt, but remember, such a small amount, you don't want to boil it over. So keep a close eye while you're at the microwave. So I've got my white melted. I'm gonna add a little bit of this Kelly green color block to it and just kind of see what I'm going for because I really just want a really light kind of pastel color, which is done and done. And then I'm gonna use Brambleberry droppers. Got some hot water right here in case my little dropper clogs. And you really want this to be pretty liquidy in order to work. So just drop down into the leaves. And what I'm noticing is I'm getting a lot of bubbles right now. So I'm gonna stop and do a little bit of rubbing alcohol to help the bubbles disperse, because the last thing we want is bubbles. And this mold is designed by soap makers for soap makers, AKA designed by us. And so these design elements really do work beautifully. Each of the leaves has a nice little crevice that the soap just sticks into easily. And it looks like every single piece of the leaf has just a little bit of accent color. So now it's time to let this harden, which only takes a minute or two, before adding the next layer on. So temperature really matters, because these details are so small and they're so fresh. If you pour this soap too hot, it's for sure gonna melt your details. So I want this like as low as I can get it, 120, 125. So I have a little bit of ways to wait. Right now I can feel the steam coming off of it, which means it's too hot. I can also just look as opposed to just feeling it. And yeah, we're at 157. Got a ways. So one of the ways I could also cool this down faster is by putting just a few chunks of clear melt and pour soap in here. And the heat transfer, meaning the amount of energy it takes to melt the clear melt and pour soap, will help bring the entire thing down faster in terms of temperature. So I'm gonna put a couple melt and pour clear soaps in there, and that's gonna help the whole thing go to a more manageable temperature quicker. Yeah, we're dropping quickly. We're at 152 now, which is great. I'm just gonna check the temperature again, because I can feel it's getting ready. It's getting thicker, it's getting gloopier. We're right around 132. Gonna give it another couple stirs and then get ready to pour. A little bit of rubbing alcohol here, just to get rid of any surface tension and make sure that, that the two layers adhere really well. And now this is getting really gloppy, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour. And I don't need much of this, just need to cover it to get a nice thin layer. Perfect. And spray with rubbing alcohol. And then we're just gonna wait 2-ish hours for these to get hard, maybe an hour because they're so thin, and get ready for step 2. I made these a few hours ago, so I'm just gonna pop these out. The silicone molds are so easy to work with. They just pop out beautifully. And you'll notice, of course, that I have 4 succulents here, and this mold has 6 cavities. So if you want to actually make all 6 cavities, you're gonna wanna do a couple batches of succulent molds just to make sure that you have enough to fill every single one of these. For step 2, we're gonna melt our clear melt and pour in the microwave, and these hold just about 4 ounces. So I've got like 24-ish ounces in here, sort of eyeballed it, 30-second bursts. My soap is melted, and now it's time to add the fragrance. And this recipe calls for just about 0.3 ounces. I'm gonna go ahead and just eyeball it. Really, you can smell those green notes right now. It is a fantastic fragrance. And one of the design considerations you have to take into account when you're making this is that you need a fragrance that isn't yellowing and isn't gonna turn brown. We call it water white fragrances. And the way you can test for that is just by making like one single solitary clear melt and pour soap and just seeing, hey, is this coloring yellow? Is it coloring kind of greenish? Is it coloring brownish? Or you can just pour a little bit of this into a container and literally look at your fragrance oil and visually inspect it to see if it's water white. That's one trick for helping to make sure that your succulents really show through beautifully. I'm gonna check my temperature because of course we're working with embeds, so we wanna make sure that our temperatures are low enough. We're above 150, so we're still hot. We're still too hot. I do like being above 140 though, and letting it sit for like a minute or so, because then all the little tiny bubbles that are just almost microscopic float to the surface. So that way we have less bubbles in here to have to deal with. I'm gonna show you one more trick though for getting this to look extra clear. It's called bluing. It's what they used to do with kind of laundry back in the day, and they probably still do it. So this is just a little bit of brilliant blue lab color, super ultra diluted. And the reason we did ultra diluted was because you want to add 1 drop at a time, because it is such a minute amount of this brilliant blue lab color that you need in order to do the bluing technique. And the bluing technique sort of gives the impression that the soap is more clear than maybe it is, because it gives it a coolish base. And you'll notice when you add the blue to the kind of almost yellowish base, it's a little yellow, right? It's made with real oils, so it's a little yellow. It almost looks a little green, but when you pour it into the individual cavities in here, it ends up looking fantastic. And this is a totally optional step. You don't have to do it, and you're still gonna get great looking soap. So this is just about 130. It's looking very clear, no air bubbles. First things first, I'm gonna spritz all of these bars of soap. That helps the layers adhere, and then just kind of position them carefully. And then once I've got that done, I'm going to slowly and carefully pour my clear soap in from one corner and sort of just flood the entire bar of soap. One thing you'll notice is that little tiny air bubbles sometimes get trapped in these tiny crevices. I think they look like dewdrops, and I think they're really pretty. If you don't like it, you can kind of jiggle the mold around a little bit to try and get the air bubbles to come up. I don't think it's an issue at all. So now I'm gonna give this one more squirt of rubbing alcohol. Pour gently and slowly in from the sides. Let that soap come up and just cover and float, and then you can just kind of push down if you want the soap, there we go, to just flood over the back. Perfect. So my soap actually got just a little bit too cool, and I don't love that, and so I'm actually going to melt some more clear melt and pour soap in the microwave and just kind of fill in the corners here and make it just a little bit smoother. So I just remelted just a little bit more clear melt and pour soap, and I'm just gonna spritz with alcohol and just pour on the top so it's a little bit more flat, and hopefully all the crevices fill in a little bit and some of the air bubbles actually come up. So we'll see what this looks like when I unmold it. So once these are hardened, you can pop them out of the mold after about 4 hours. You're gonna have something that looks just about like this, and they're ready to use right away or give away. You can wrap them in saran wrap or put them into a little cellophane baggie. They're so cute. And if you were inspired by today's video, please give it a thumbs up down below and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified every single time videos come out. And if you post your stuff to social media, please hashtag it BrambleOn so we can all see what you create and get inspired by the community of creators. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see what you create. The first step for this kind of two-part process is I hold up 3 fingers. Okay. Look who is the best. Yeah. You know, every time they want to do melt and pour on. What is that? How
my beautiful wow.
How dare it? Well, now Lizzo's in my head.
Well, that's not so bad.
No, I also feel slightly sick from the